seen this in Canterbury, it's amazing. So I'm Jan Parl, and I'm chair of the Canterbury Society, and it's us who have organised these hustings this evening. Just a few remarks before I hand over to Rick Norman, who's going to chair us for the hustings. But there's a few things to say before that. Particular welcome to those who haven't been to a Canterbury Society meeting before, or an event, or a little pick. There's leaflets at the back if you're inspired to join. Do join, you'll be very, very welcome. Thank you for coming. We hope you enjoy the evening. Do get your questions ready. We hope for a nice wide range of questions on a lot of different topics, so be thinking of them while the candidates do their presentations. Thank you very much to the candidates who've all come along. I think we've got a fine body of people here. We had a difficulty because, of course, we're trying to cover the whole of Canterbury, C1 and C2, and there's far more candidates standing in that area than we could manage to have along. So we've invited each party which has got 2 or more candidates standing to send a representative. So the 4 representing the 4 parties are like what I call the party candidates, and then we have 2 independent candidates who are equally welcome, who will also have a chance to have their say. I think it's important to say that the Canterbury Society is strictly non-party political, so we're very keen this evening that every candidate should get a fair chance to have their say and be able to say the things they want to say and be treated with respect. It's very important that we create a climate of opinion in which we can respect different views. We're going to allow the candidates 3 minutes, poor things, to present their basic statement, but we don't apologise for that, because 3 minutes is what the council gives us when we go and talk about it. They're going to get 3 minutes. And then, oh yes, that's right, we're going to we're trying to make it fair, as I said. We're going to ask somebody to draw.
I've got somebody lined up, Jan.
You've got somebody,
Are you going to do it now?
A completely fair person. Who's going to do it?
This is for the order in which the
order in which
candidates
the speak, to make it fair.
I asked Sue to do it, so...
Sue. Okay, who's going to speak first? Will you read out the names?
Right. Ben Fitterhart.
Ben first. And who's next?
Stephen Peckham.
Stephen Peckham, good. Who's next?
Pat Edwards. Nick Eden Green.
Thank you very much. That's
All right.
a good job done. And now we have 2
Two more. Those are 2 bits, yes.
2 independent candidates. I would say the party candidates get first and then the independents, but they too have to be drawn from the hat by Sue.
Tension rises.
Absolutely. Alan Tullett. So I assume that George.
No, come and pick it out.
We're not going to solve
I'm right.
So that's that. We hope that will work out fairly.
What's the final candidate, please?
Joe
What's the name of the final candidate?
Joe Edgerton, an independent, standing in Barton Ward.
Bleed Forest. Yes.
So, some ground rules. As I said, it's a time for respect in a sensible way. The candidates have 3 minutes to present their ideas, and then it's questions from the floor. And again, I think Richard, who's our chair, will take it and give everybody a chance to answer first, so that it's
Yes, on a
circulated
sort of random basis.
a random basis, that's right. We have to remember that some of the candidates are here to represent 38 other candidates standing in 6 different wards. Whereas the independents are basically representing themselves and in just 1 ward. So I think it would be understandable if Rick asked the party candidates, to answer the questions, but the independents just, if you know, it seems appropriate.
Yeah, I made it a ratio of 1 to 5.5.
Whatever you decide. And if anybody doesn't behave themselves, I've got here, the chair of the meeting has the right to ask anyone who fails to adhere to acceptable conduct to leave the meeting in a peaceful way. So I think that's the guidelines. Any questions about what we've proposed? I think we're hoping to finish by about 9, but there'll be a chance to sort of chat and meet each other after that. Any questions?
The
video. I forgot my thank you bit. Thank you very much to Alex and Nessa, who've set up live streaming. So it's like being in Parliament, really. It's all going to be live streamed. Some people may even be watching at home.
They're both really enjoying it.
So if anybody is not comfortable with that, perhaps they could put their hand up now, or perhaps they could just quietly and unobtrusively move to the corners at the back. I think all the candidates are happy with that. Anyway, very big thanks to Alex and Nessa for setting that up, because it's quite a thrilling thing to not had that before. And thanks as well to all the people who've helped set up the room, who've done the tea and coffee. Thanks to all of them. So, good evening, and over to you, Rick. Thank you. Thanks to Rick for being our chair. I know from experience that he's a really good, fair, strong chair.
We shall see.
We're in good hands. Thank you, Rick.
Okay, thanks. But yes, since we're in the business of thanks, can I first of all just thank Jan and Richard Skase, who I know has done a lot of work, and everybody in the Canterbury Society for organising this meeting, and it's great to see local democracy alive and well. And just to add my emphasis to what Jan said about the rules of the meeting, that I know, looking around, that a lot of you have come with your minds pretty much already made up, but just bear in mind that there are people who haven't yet decided who they're going to vote for and want to give a fair hearing to all the candidates, and I'm sure that you'll make that possible. Thanks. So we've established the order in which candidates are going to give their initial presentations. So I'll ask Ben Fitter-Harding for the Conservative Party to kick off. Ben.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having me. I'm Ben Fitter-Harding. I'm a Conservative councillor and candidate for Blean Forest, which is 3 villages plus the St Thomas Hill area of Canterbury and the University of Kent. I want to talk to you a little bit about what we've been doing, because I'm a sitting councillor at the moment, and how we'd like to move forward if elected. First and foremost, our primary campaign pledge is to campaign for a new full-service hospital for Canterbury. Now, it's not directly in our gift to be able to provide this. However, our leader, Simon Cook, has been lobbying at every level to try and give us the best possible chance of having a full-service hospital in Canterbury. And the council, being a significant landholder and with land assets in that area, is leveraging it as far as is possible to try and achieve that too. We have, after 4 years of restructure within the council, made it ready to build. We can build houses for the first time in I'm not even sure how long. We have 2 pilots underway at the moment, one in Canterbury and one in Herne Bay, and those will be residential developments that include social housing that is owned by Canterbury City Council for social rent. If these pilots are successful, then in the next council we would like to greatly expand that scheme to some districts. We're now a digital first council, which has been no small undertaking, but it's been largely an internal process. The most obvious outcome of this is the parking changes that you will have all seen. This is just the beginning. The technology that we've been deploying we would like to use across the district for a number of uses to help us improve our environment and improve congestion. We've been investing a lot in the public realm, which is really important because at the county level, clearly there is not the funding available to do the kind of work, the fabric of our city that it needs. We've recently completed the works to Orange Street, Best Lane and the Friars, which I'm really pleased and impressed with. And we would very much like to return to St George's Street in Canterbury to undertake vital works there. We did consult on works last year, which didn't go down particularly well with the public, so we've scrapped them, and we're hoping to come back in the next council with new proposals, new exciting proposals for that part of the city. Graffiti has been a real problem, and it's a problem that we all see as we're walking around Canterbury every day. It's one that we've really struggled to grapple with, but it is one that we've done a lot of work on and learned an awful lot about. We already have 1 graffiti officer now, and we would like to be recruiting for a second one. And I hope that you'll be able to ask me some questions about what we'd like to plan to do there in the future. We've laid the foundations for a bin company for Canterbury, a public-owned bin company to be run by Canterbury City Council when the current contractor finishes. This will allow us to directly control service levels for the provision of bin collections and street cleaning, and I think that's vitally important. It'll also allow us to invest in technology to make our bin collections more sustainable. Finally, we've been trying to create and want to continue to create a council that listens. One of the biggest criticisms of the previous administration was that it didn't, so we completely scrapped how we consult. We've changed it very much We've changed when we consult so that it's earlier in processes so that we can make real differences. And we would like to continue to be able to do that. And we've also undertaken a complete community governance review, which, while not implementing town councils at this stage, we hope to leave the door open to that for the future if demand arises. Thank you for listening to me, and I look forward to your questions. Thanks.
Next up is Stephen Peckham for the Green Party.
Thank you very much, Roy. My name is Stephen Peckham. I'm representing the Canterbury District Green Party and I'm standing in Barton. And you might say, why vote for the Green Party? Well, the Green Party is actually leading the way. We can see now that all the parties are following our lead to talk about climate change, to talk about the environment, to talk about building communities, sustainable development. These are all things that other parties are now saying they would want to do. But the Green Party's been arguing about these things for decades. And I think it is our time. We have the ideas. We've been involved in campaigns. As I walked this evening, I've been in London today, and I walked past from West Station, and I see the trees that have been cut down there. I see the number of trees that were to go in the city centre, which the Green Party was involved in actually campaigning to save. We can look at areas like Wincheap, where we see the Stour Valley under threat from this council. And like other parties, we want to build a community for the people in this community. We work with other people. We work across party, we work with local groups. We work towards building a greener city which is made for local sustainable businesses, sustainable housing. We want to build better facilities for pedestrians and cyclists to try and ease some of the congestion we see in the city, improve public transport. And the council can lever these things. We're not responsible necessarily as for health or social care or for public transport and coaches, but the council can act on these things. We can act on air pollution. This is a big issue in the city, something I've personally been involved with for many years. But we will work with other people to do this. We can build more sustainable housing. The council has a large housing stock. It is now able to borrow money, and this would be a good investment. We have hundreds and thousands of people on our waiting list. We have a homelessness problem, and we have to deal with these things, not just with affordable housing, but actually using the assets of the council, but the assets of our community. There are lots of groups in this city which contribute enormously to the way we think about improving our city. And I think for Greens, we would work with you to do this. And we would make consultation real and work for real things rather than what we've had in the past, which is a consultation, but then find that nobody listens. If you vote Green, you are really voting for a change. I think this is the time for the Green Party to show that we can provide leadership in this city.
So next, Pat Edwards, who's a candidate for the Labour Party.
Hello, I'm Pat Edwards and I'm speaking for the Labour Party, and our manifesto is entitled It's Time for Change. Labour has a vision for the future of Canterbury, which is very much aligned with that of the Canterbury Society. The Labour approach will be radical, changing the council to be caring, genuinely consultative and compassionate. Voices all over the constituency are clear that the values on which Canterbury City Council has been run are deeply unpopular and need to change. Nearly 2 years ago you made history by electing MP Rosie Duffield, which created a sense of hope, and so many people are glad she is working for us today. Now you have the chance to make history again by changing radically the way the City Council works, to be representative, listening and committed to positive change. Labour will build a dynamic locally based economy to transform the area. We will make sure your council tax is spent on things local people need to live well, not the profits of multinational companies and developers. Gone will be the lack of consideration for the representation of residents, and in will be a real focus of the impact on people's lives, a compassionate approach focused on the needs of the local population with the voice of residents at the heart of decision making. We will take responsibility for our unique heritage, our environment, and our impact on the future. Labour has a vision for change based on the best models of local authorities in the country. We'll build on good initiatives elsewhere, which are successful in serving the needs of the communities. Some of the policies we are committed to are build or buy 2,000 good quality council homes, Bin Serco bring rubbish and recycling in-house, ending outsourcing, an all year round street homeless hostel, monitoring air quality including particulates, ensuring carbon neutrality by 2030 and consult on the plan to reduce congestion. We'll crack down on developers revisiting the local plan to ensure necessary infrastructure, affordable homes, green spaces and community enterprise are built in. We need to shift all CCC procurement to local suppliers and bring in the real living wage, end fuel poverty by starting a community energy scheme, regenerate our high streets and local economy by creating community wealth. The key thing is these pledges are deliverable, based on sound financial management. The Conservatives borrowed tens of millions of pounds to buy Whitefriars and pay for the unloved, unwanted and unnecessary Station Road West car park. Labour would invest in projects to help people, such as more council and social housing and an integrated transport system. It is not just about the individual policies, but an overhaul of the way the city is run, with vision and values that shape an approach focused on the needs of local communities for quality of life. It's time for change. Canterbury can change. Vote Labour.
Getting the impression all the candidates have impeccably practiced their timing for 3 minutes. Let's see how we go. Nick Eden Green is now going to speak on behalf of the Liberal Democrats.
Thank you. Our manifesto has huge parallels with the Canterbury Society vision document. They go together. Overall, our vision would be to see all parties working together. It happened when we ran the council. We had a local plan agreed by all parties. We agreed to rebuild the Marlow. We agreed a recycling scheme. We want to return to those days. Our manifesto is in 5 sections: health, transport, environment, housing and the economy. I can't possibly cover it all in 3 minutes. It's all on our website and I'll give you a taste of some of the specific local policies under those headings. Health, a new hospital. Alex Lister is standing in Westgate, is on the NHS board. Tackle antisocial behaviour, graffiti and the nighttime economy. Why on earth did Labour bring in the 2003 Licensing Act, which has been a disaster for us? Support community groups such as the Thannington Resource Centre and the Citizens Advice Bureau. Transport, park and ride buses to be electric charge points at our taxi ranks. Promote cycling and public transport. Scrap the multi-storey car park at Station Road West. It's a travesty that 9.1 million is spent on this and another 2 million on automatic barriers at our car parks when we can't even clean the streets. The environment, make Canterbury carbon neutral by 2030. Plant a tree for every 4 residents. We proposed £10,000 for air quality monitors. It was opposed by the Conservatives and Labour. New housing developments to have south-facing roofs, electric charge points, sustainable urban drainage systems and permeable driveways. Oppose the extension of the Wincheap Park and Ride onto the water meadows. Build a multi-storey car park on the existing Park and Ride site there instead, and scrap the crazy, dangerous hairpin bend on the 4th Slip Road. Housing, build 250 new council homes a year. Clamp down on unlicensed HMOs and revoke licences on HMOs where there's persistent bad behaviour. Revisit the local plan, which allows a proliferation of student halls of residence in the city, where we need permanent housing for our residents. Jobs and the economy. I'm running out of time.
42 seconds.
A world-class Christmas market. Restore the grant to Canterbury Festival that brings £3.5 million into the local economy. And fight against Brexit, which threatens everything from our tourism industry to our local farmers to our universities. Our policies show a direction of travel with many simple, practical, deliverable improvements. They not only align with the Canterbury Society vision document, but also the UN Sustainable Development Goals. We absolutely endorse think global, act local. That's precisely what this manifesto does, and I commend it to you. Thank you.
Alan Tullett, independent candidate.
Thank you very much for the Catholic Society allowing me to speak today. Obviously, I'm an independent candidate speaking standing for Westgate Ward, so my perspective is probably more localised than the general view of the parties that are speaking this evening. My history is I'm chair of the St Dunstan's Residents Association, have been for a couple of years, involved in local community activities, organising litter picks, organising projects such as repainting Whitehall Bridge and getting funding for other projects which are ongoing at the moment. Over the last couple of years I've seen the city centre really deteriorate with a lot more rubbish, a lot more graffiti. The nut-time economy is very boisterous and a lot of antisocial behaviour issues there. And you know, I get it hands-on as much as I possibly can to try and clean up and help fix these issues where I can, but I feel the Canterbury City Council need to be doing more. It's fantastic we've got the one officer who's going out removing graffiti. We don't need one more, we need 2 or 3 more possibly to keep on top of it, because I find as soon as you clear it, it's straight back again, unfortunately. I would also like to see a lot more green spaces in the city, because I know with the multi-storey car park there have been discussions about building on Rosemary Lane car park and potentially other sites as well. I would actually rather see those spaces potentially reclaimed, because we already have problems with congestion and traffic in the city which are causing all manner of pollution issues. Why we don't want to be adding more of that on into our city streets. Not only that will compound the parking problems which local residents are having, who are paying extortionate fees that are going up year on year, and it was highlighted in the press again this week about how much city centre and Whitstable residents are paying for their parking, but not actually receiving a good service or many times an actual space to be able to park on the local roads. We also need to do more around the park and rides. We need a 4th option around Brendley Corner. Windsheep one is definitely in the wrong place and needs to be moved out, and I don't agree with multi-stories there or other suggestions that are being put forward. And also, there has been mooted for the last 20 odd years, I believe, about an eastern bypass, which will help alleviate a lot of freight traffic around the city. That actually needs to come forward, and action needs to happen on that. Just a last point, because I don't know how I'm doing on time, Rick, but
27 seconds.
Just on social housing, I know Labour are very keen for 2,000 homes. I actually personally would involve housing associations in that. They are best placed for building good quality homes that they look after very well priced for the rental market. They look after the tenants fantastically, and many of them actually provide drug and mental health support and excellent training for getting people back into employment. Far more than a council can do on their own. Thank you.
Joe, thank you for waiting patiently. Joe Egerton is the other independent candidate.
Can I thank you for this document? I mean, when people put together, give up their time and trouble to put together 14 detailed pages, it's impossible to deal with it all in 3 minutes, but I've made some notes which I brought some copies. I hope I can give you to them afterwards so you can see some more of my more detailed responses. But it is really important that we have this level of engagement, that people do come forward, that they do start thinking things through. One of the functions of an independent is actually to be a bit difficult with the other parties, to remind them occasionally of what they're there for. And that's not for party policy, it's to serve the people of this city and to secure their welfare. Just over 100 years ago, the greatest civic leader this country's ever produced had his 70th birthday. His city, Birmingham, entertained him. He asked, speaking to them, what made us a great city? there were yells of you, and his reply was no. A whole generation was willing to make the sacrifices to make this a great city. And if we look at things here, people are going to have to make sacrifices of money, of time, and of effort. And to do that, we have to restore some confidence in our politics. We have to restore some sense of integrity and probity. And I'm very sorry to have to say that I find in certain respects that that is lacking. I was appalled when one of the first things the Conservative county councillors did on taking office was to whack up their expenses by 15%. £1.9 million. Just south of this area, at Nonnington, there's a Church of England primary school that has spaces for 9 special needs, according to its prospectus and brochure. They're empty. It costs £900,000 to put it there. Now, I just say to you, we cannot expect people to make sacrifices. We cannot expect people to be willing to reach into their pockets. We cannot expect them to give things up to reduce pollution unless we restore decency and probity. I've had many years working on various projects. I can recognise a dog's breakfast when I see them. And I can tell you, George over here, George Metcalfe, was absolutely bang on to resist that ridiculous car park. But we have got to put a stop to these stupidities, but we've also got to restore integrity and probity, and we have to get back to the principle politicians are here to serve the people.
Joe gets the prize for being spot on 3 minutes, but everybody else did very well as well, so congratulations. So we throw it open to questions now. Just on 2 primary points. Please can we have questions on local issues? This is Hustings for the local elections, and we need to focus on the local issues, please, not the national ones. The obvious point, please, could we have questions, not speeches? And I will also try to get a spread of topics on the questions. I don't know quite how we're going to achieve that, but please at least don't ask a question on a topic that's already been thoroughly worked over. So we'll see how it goes. Okay, all right, Jeff, you had your hand up first.
Thank you.
Over there.
This doesn't sound like a local topic, but it is.
Right, make it local, right?
The informed and eminent naturalist, Sir David Attenborough, addressed the International Monetary Fund in Washington last week, saying that we are in terrible, terrible trouble in respect to the natural world and its extinctions. In view of this, what would each candidate do here as a local contribution towards addressing this situation?
Right, okay, so emphasis on what would you do locally to address it. Nick, would you like to start?
Yeah, sure. We actually, as the Lib Dems, advanced a local tax of 5p on plastic bags way before the government introduced it. It was voted down by the other parties, but we were there first. That's something that, thank heavens, has been done. We would advocate immediately and the same thing to be done, as it's done in Germany, on all bottles, for example, glass, plastic, all of them. Put a deposit on them so that you can take them back to a supermarket or to a bottle bank or what have you, get your money back. It happens in Canada brilliantly. What happens there is anybody who throws away a tin can or a bottle in a waste bin, the local down and outs pick them up, the local alcoholics pick them up, they collect them up, they get their money back, they spend their night boozing and go out the next day and pick up another lot of rubbish. We've actually got a situation there that we know works, where we actually get people who are on the street picking up bottles and dealing with them. Why on earth can't we do the same thing in Canterbury? That's just a couple of things. Thank you.
I forgot to remind you at the beginning that I won't be able to put all of the questions to the 2 independents just out of a matter of fairness, so we'll just have to judge that as time goes. But let's stick with the party candidates for the moment. Ben, would you like to take this one?
Thank you very much. I'm going to take a slightly different angle. and talk a bit about the technology that we can use. The £1.3 million system of barriers that's been going into car parks across the district is the beginning of a system that uses technology to detect how many vehicles are coming into our city, when they're coming into our city, and what types of engines they have. It's the beginning of a system of sensors that can monitor air quality not monthly, not weekly, not daily, but in real time, and make decisions for our car parks and for our roads, for our park and rides, to route traffic to where it's going to cause the least amount of damage to our air quality. We can use technology to help keep our city clean and clear, to monitor bin fill levels, to monitor the condition of public toilets. It's the beginning of a system that can help make our city cleaner, more efficient and more environmentally friendly. And that's why we're undertaking that course of action, and that's what I would like to press ahead with. Thank you.
Pat, would you like to go next?
Our manifesto pledge is to establish a climate change board, and this is to aim for being carbon neutral by 2025. The way in which that would happen in terms of the City Council initially would be to transfer all the vehicles in quick time as possible to electric. We would really continue with the idea, in reality, put it in place, of electric charging points. I know there's been a long wait for those to happen. We definitely don't and have been vociferously opposed to the car park on the River Stour. I just want to make that very clear. And we definitely want to clear and clean that river because there's a lot of plastic in it. I walk regularly there, and a lot needs to be done to improve that part of the environment. Can I just say that behind our manifesto we do have some other stuff on our website, and in particular going for single-use plastic and supporting the campaign in Whitstable, we think should be extended to Canterbury as well. So plastic-free Whitstable should be plastic-free Canterbury, but we should certainly be making great strides in improving single-use plastics and all the other associated things that go with that.
Thank you. These have been Green Party policies for as long as I can remember. In terms of what we would do practically, I think there are a number of key things. Yes, I agree that we need to think about air pollution, therefore we'll be looking at the introduction of hybrid and electric taxis and buses. We can look at things like workplace charging to reduce the number of cars coming in for businesses. That's been done in Nottingham very successfully. We can look at amendments to the local plan, for example, increasing the sustainability quality of all new building. Currently nationally level 3, we could push that up a level to ensure that we're actually conserving energy when we're building new builds. I'd like to see not just recycling and looking at plastic, we need to be working with local businesses to reduce waste overall. We should be aiming for zero waste in this city. It's been done in other countries and other cities. We should be looking at working with our local businesses, not just to recycle, but actually to eliminate the waste in the first place. And I think these are the sorts of things we'll be looking at from a green. And then finally, we want to maintain biodiversity. So of course, no car park on River Stour. Actually greening the city centre in terms of more trees, more spaces, more green spaces, using green screening where we need to along children's playgrounds, by schools, and actually thinking about how we change traffic. Most of the traffic that comes into the city is passing through the city, not from long way away, but actually passing from one bit of the city to the other. We need to get better public transport and changing the way that people actually use the space within the city.
With apologies to Alan and Joe, I think we'll move on to another question, but do feel free to sort of work that into subsequent answers to other questions if we want to. One over here and then one here.
Yeah. Connie Nolan, I'm the Labour candidate for Barton Ward. Given the fact that the Canterbury West multi-storey car park is such a weight around the neck now of Canterbury City Council, what would the candidates propose should be done with it if they got into overall power on the council?
Thanks. So what would the candidates do with or about the multi-storey car park in Station Road West if elected. Ben, I think you'd better kick off with this one.
Thank you. I thought that might be coming. Thank you for the question. I have to object to the car park being referred to as that, because the car park is not a burden on Canterbury City Council in any way. The money that is borrowed to build that car park is repaid by the business plan of building the car park and the people that will park in it and use it. By doing it, it concentrates spaces from valuable land that surrounds the Station Road West area and allows that area to be used for things like a sustainable transport hub, things that we all want. But it can't be done if we don't put the cars somewhere, and that's why they need to go in the multi-storey car park. I've had questions about, why can't we spend the money on something else? It has to be able to pay that loan back. The multi-storey car park, far from being a noose around anyone's neck, will leave the council with a valuable asset, and it will generate an additional income for the council that can be used for our transport needs. So, all in all, I would say that I would absolutely support continuing to build the car park. I want it to be an integral part of our sustainable transport hub at Canterbury West Station. I want it to contribute to our local economy. I want it to be there for commuters. I want it to be there for people that need to shop in the St Dunstan's area. I think it's an important asset for our city. So I fully support the car park and why we're doing it. It doesn't hinder the council doing anything else. The council can still do any other project. It can still do social housing. It can still do everything else. It's a completely independent project that pays for itself. Thank you.
Alan, I'm going to bring you in there because this is in your neck of the woods of St Dunstan's Residents Association. So would you like to say something on this?
Yeah, just briefly. I spoke against the planning application for a multi-storey car park. I was involved with the campaign group as well against it, and put out as much support, information to people to try and campaign and even speak against the application themselves. It is a giant folly of the council, unfortunately. He's saying about bringing more shoppers into the St Dunstan's area. Well, they're just going to be stuck in traffic because of the sheer volume of cars that are being brought into the local area, especially where they're going to be redirected from parking in parts of the city centre. So, it's just going to cause no end of problems around our part of town. I was of the view till recently that unfortunately by the time the election actually comes around that they would have poured the foundations and they would have been well into it. Thankfully, as of today, very little groundwork seems to have been done, so there still may be an opportunity to stop the car park going forward depending on the contract with Wilmot Dixon, but the council haven't been particularly open and transparent with the contract, so we actually don't know what the forfeiture will be to be able to cancel the deal, but hopefully we can.
Not obligatory on all the party candidates to answer each question, but I'm guessing you might want to deal with this one. And Nick, do you want to go on this?
Yes, I certainly do. Quite straightforwardly, we'd scrap it. No equivocation about that. We've obviously got to look at the contract when we take it over and see if we can do so and at what cost, but scrap it we will. That's our intent. What in its place? A transport hub, a properly thought through transport hub, not the joke that's been put forward by the council so far. We've put forward plans for a proper transport hub with, for example, park and ride buses meeting initially at least the commuter trains so that commuters can get there straightforwardly and easily from the park and ride. This car park will concentrate the traffic into St Stephen's, away from the Whitefriars Centre, which the Canterbury City Council has invested £150 million in, so they're actually drawing traffic away from the very place that needs it, because Whitefriars does need good parking to service its shops, and it is in danger at the moment of not being able to do so. I spoke and voted against this car park from the outset. It is a monstrously ugly building apart from anything else. Shades of the old Whitefriars car park, which thank heavens was finally torn down when Whitefriars was redeveloped. We will be wanting to tear this one down long before we've reached its payback time. And the payback period will be for years. And finally, it doesn't even bring us any more spaces, because by the time you've taken into account the temporary car park that there is, by the time you've taken into account the fact that Rosemary Lane will be sold off, we'll end up with a net reduction in spaces overall and spending 9.1 million plus on a car park that nobody wants, nobody needs, with fewer spaces. What a bloody nonsense.
In the business this only stacks up if you just ignore the fact that we're going to lose income from other closed car parks. But why would you spend £9.5 million putting up a multi-storey and £50,000 on an integrated transport hub? It's kind of laughable. And the space is taken away. Where is the drop-off space? Where are the bus stops? What we can do at a bus stop and a bus shelter, 50,000? You know, there's no space left. I came out that station today, the taxis and the cars are waiting along Station Road West. And this is a quiet time of year because they can't go anywhere else. There isn't any space because the car park takes all the space up. The cost at £50,000 for a parking space seems just absolutely ridiculous. And I concur with everything that Anne has said about drawing traffic into an area where the pollution levels we know are higher than are good for health and higher than the national limits. This is wrong. I would support any party that would be scrapping this car park.
I agree with a lot of the last three speakers, and I particularly want to say that our policy is to cancel it as well. We would be investing the money in integrated transport systems. I would like to say very specifically that Simon Morley has led the argument from the Labour side against this car park all the way through. I know Alan Baldock has been out on the campaign as well. We don't agree with it at all. The particular things I'd just like to mention, we'd like to see electric hopper buses going between the stations. We know that I know it's only painting them in, but you know, for about £2.5 million we could put cycle lanes through the city. It's a no-brainer. Why wouldn't we be doing? We simply haven't put the energy and thought into making the transport changes that we need in this city. We just haven't done it, and that money would be there if we cancelled the car park. I appreciate what everybody's saying, that there may be some there are some issues to do with the contract and cancelling it, but that's what we would do.
Joe, since I gave Alan an opportunity, do you want to come in on this one, or do you want to reserve your right for another question?
Very quickly, I had a letter in the Gazette saying I was very concerned about the financial projections, which of course we haven't seen, but I had doubts. I also raised the possibility that we should have an investigation to see if those councillors, if there's a heavy cancellation charges, those councillors who voted for this thing before the elections might not be invited to make a personal contribution on doing this cost.
Right, question here, and then I think you were going to come afterwards. Yes. And then you had your hand up, Jan, didn't you?
I did.
Yeah, you have rights in this meeting. And then one there, and then one at the back. Okay, so that's a queue of 4 for the moment.
Yes, good evening, Carl Wright, and great to see such an excellent turnout here tonight. I'd like to ask a question to the candidates, coming back to the issue, but more specifically on sustainable development. And I represent, or I'm involved with the Canterbury Sustainable Development Goals Forum, which brings together a lot of community groups, brings together the University of Kent, University of Christchurch, and we have been actually engaging with both the City Council and with KCC, Canterbury County Council, on promoting sustainable development. And I was just in Brussels yesterday attending a local government meeting where I saw stickers all over the city on rebellion, extinction rebellion. And of course we've seen the young children in this very town walking in the streets in protest, and you know, it's a shame not more young people are here. There are some here, but I think it's important that we reach out not just to young people but the wider population, both on climate change but on sustainable development. So the question I've got to the candidates is, right, I come to the question. Very specifically, the Canterbury Forum has put the point, would the candidates pledge to, 1, ensure to the principle of sustainable development being incorporated in the new corporate plan of the council once elected? 2, would they encourage the alignment of council policies and plans to various sustainable development targets, which of course go beyond climate change? And so we produced this big pamphlet here, which is very much in line with what the Canterbury Society has done. And finally, perhaps most importantly, would they follow the examples of cities like Bristol and many European cities of appointing a lead councillor to look at sustainable development and champion the sustainable development goals? Thank you.
So 3 things that you're being asked to pledge to on the Sustainable Development Goals. And Pat, would you like to go first? Did you get all three? Or do you want me to repeat them?
With the chair's permission, we could pass this.
Oh, okay, right, okay, you've got them set out here. Right. Pat.
Well, first of all, I thought it was very interesting, the Forum report, and I did read it thoroughly. I felt that there was a lot of alignment with, I mean, I could see that the train of thought goes straight from the Sustainable Development Goals feed into the Canterbury Society's goals as well. And there was a lot of alignment with our manifesto pledges too. So I think that it would not be difficult for the Labour Party to be totally committed to these points that you're requesting. I think that one of the things that we would want to see, we talked about building council homes. I'll just focus on this one point, it's an example. We talked about the building of council homes, but we did say social and council, so we would work with housing associations just to make that clear as well. And we've always talked about the quality of the build, and we shouldn't be, although we may obviously have to think about size of houses in terms of affordability and so on and so forth, but we should think about the quality and sustainability of all the buildings that we do. So that's just one example. I think in terms of aligning council policies and plans, as I say, it looked fairly seamless to me, trying to translate across the three documents, which I was trying to do for today, to get this alignment. And I think that could feed into the way in which the Labour Party manifesto will be translated into the council goals when we rewrite those next year. And the idea of a lead council on sustainable development, again, I think that we need champions for a number of things, I think. I think that's about the environment. We've seen the success of the parks officer. I think we need individual people to take responsibility, and that might be individual councillors for certain areas of sustainability, and it may be also enlarging a team within the City Council to do this work, because I think there isn't enough attention paid to it. And I was particularly struck by the sort of green infrastructure strategy, for example, and that we all commented on. It was very much about aspirations, not very much about practical reality, and those aspirations won't be practical reality unless we put some means to achieving them and some serious targets and goals behind them. So.
I was so impressed with everybody keeping to their 3 minutes that I've not been timing your answers to the questions. Keep it brief, guys. Nick.
Thank you. Sustainable development has been absolutely at the core of our wishes for the local plan. Sadly, not always incorporated. What we've done is to build or propose building houses all around the fringe of the city in the most unsustainable locations where people have got to travel in. And instead we've been putting up student halls of residence in the centre of the city. We should have been doing the reverse. We should be having houses for local people where people can walk, where they needn't have cars, where they can get public transport, where they can get to the shops. That is the very start of sustainable development in this city. Secondly, on the houses that we are building, we should insist on electric charge points built into the houses. It costs a few pounds to do it when the houses are being developed. It costs a lot of money to retrofit them. Green roofs, south-facing roofs, so that people can put solar panels on if the developer won't do it in the first place. Sustainable urban drainage systems, permeable driveways. All of these things could and should be built into every house that we build, and it can be done at minimal or no cost. So there is a start in terms of sustainable development as it relates to housing. The same thing then floods over into transport, because if you build the houses in the right place and you have proper public transport put in, then you don't need to use the motor car, and that spills over into the roads. We have forgotten things that the Victorians did in terms of sustainability. Why are there no new city centre parks, for example? We're talking about, yes, we will put in a tree for every 4 new residents, but we need parks and gardens centrally for people to play in and to use and to relax in. Thank heavens the Victorians did it in a few places in this city, but it's not happening anymore. And finally, as far as following other cities are concerned, yes, we should be following not just Bristol, but Brighton and other cities as well, because they've done it and they are doing it now, and we can and should be doing it as well. Thank you.
Don't forget the specifics of the questions about the corporate plan and the lead councillor. Ben, do you want to go next on this?
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you very much for bringing this to us. In terms of sustainable development goals, absolutely that should be reflected in the next corporate plan, and we should certainly explore how that can be reflected in it. But actually there's probably just as much chance when the local plan is being reviewed to try and incorporate factors of that in there as well, because a lot will have changed since the last corporate plan was written. It may have been passed in the last council, the one that was just ending, but it was written in the one before that. So it's very much something that needs to be continuously reviewed and monitored. And it would be really interesting to hold it in the perspective of sustainable development goals now. In terms of aligning the council's specific policies, then that would emanate from the corporate plan, which would then feed through into how the officers undertake their day-to-day lives working for the council. And as far as appointing a lead councillor on sustainable development, it might be better to go a step further. I've been chairing the Sustainable Transport Forum on Canterbury City Council, and it's been a really interesting way to convene different stakeholders from across the county, private sector and public sector, to come up with ideas for how we can tackle the transport challenges that our city faces, particularly when so many of them fall outside the purview of Canterbury City Council. We don't directly control any of this. Setting up a similar forum for sustainable development may well be a very good way of conveying that and activating that message and achieving some real outcomes. Thank you.
So I think just to answer the question, yes. I think that's very closely to green policy traditionally. I do think we need to get to grips with the local development plan. It really needs to be reviewed. It is ineffectual in the way that it can protect the city, but more importantly, about building in things like green infrastructure and sustainable approaches is actually an economic benefit to the city. We need to start thinking about a different way of investing in the city, about building things like social infrastructure funds, about building for local people, building community neighbourhood plans, not just having a wide district plan as well. And I think these are the sorts of things I would like to see a Green Council pushing through this particular council. It's a big change of direction. You know, we may talk about a sustainable transport forum, but a lot of the people who wanted to be involved in it are actually not allowed to be involved in it. The Canterbury Society suggested it. They're not involved. It seems to me that there's too much control about the interface with this council and local people. We actually need to build different forums that allow people and draw on the skills and abilities and the range of things and ideas in our communities, which actually add to the benefit of our communities.
I'm conscious that we're already quite a way into the questions session, and there are even more hands going up, so I'm going to move on if I may. And Jan, I promised you next, and then let me just get the sequence right. Then you, then one at the back, then there. That'll take care of the rest of the meeting. Okay.
So
You're next.
when the Canterbury Society did our vision for the future of the city, we did a questionnaire among residents about what their concerns were. Top of the list was transport and traffic. Second on the list was heritage. And that's what I want to ask a question about. In particular, I want to ask about the deterioration of historic buildings in the city, a lot of neglected buildings, and not the enforcement powers that there used to be at the council. We're dealing with that. A lot of garish shop fronts along the high street. Our high street is looking more and more tatty. No museum telling the history of the city since the closure of the Poor Priest Hospital. We're in charge, our generation, of one of the great historic cities of Europe. And I just want to know what your party would do to protect, conserve, enhance that heritage for the future.
Well, right, it's going to be strictly 1 minute answers from now on. Stephen, you can comment.
I think that's a really important issue. I think heritage is really important for this city. With over 7 million visitors to the city every year, We need to take a much more proactive approach to sustaining our heritage. The World Heritage status of Canterbury is under threat at the moment from the policies that have been put in place by this current council. You know, we need to actually start to build things around. I think not just the Sustainable Forum, we need to actually make the Heritage Forum a real thing. We need to have a council officer and a council that actually supports heritage, because it's actually investment for our community. And therefore, I would endorse all of that. But actually, again, what we need to do is to set up the real action, not just write policies like the last policy, which has sat around for years, and I don't think anything has been done from it. It's a bit like the Air Quality Action Plan from 2009, the green strategy. They're great, but nothing's ever done. And we've got to change that. We have got something that actually works.
Ben?
Thank you very much. We have some fantastic heritage in this city. One of the problems has always been how we pay for that heritage. Now, there are places like the Westgate, which are vibrant, alive buildings, beautiful historic buildings that are well maintained, but they're alive. You can go in them, there's museums and all sorts in there that you can do and eat and drink, and it's fantastic to see an asset like that so integrated into the fabric of Canterbury. We need to work to find similar uses for other historic buildings that we have that are sitting dormant and that desperately need repair and money spent on them. And we need to find groups, friends groups, to rally around those assets and to fund them for the future. But there's more that we can do for heritage on our high street, for example. We have been successful more recently in getting rid of some of the more garish signage that has been popping up. We need to do more of that. We need to remove A-boards by working with the Canterbury Business Improvement District to remove clutter from our high street. And we need to find the money to redo parts of the high street that are done in 80s, 90s block paving that really doesn't fit within the heritage landscape of Canterbury, and bring it so that it's fit for purpose for our residents and for our visitors. Thank you.
Nick?
Thank you. Yes, heritage is actually our biggest single economic asset. So we have to find the money to pay to preserve it, because if we don't, we will lose our single biggest economic asset. That's what people come to Canterbury for, whether they're tourists from overseas or tourists within England or people just coming here to shop. We need to deal with the litter, we need to deal with the graffiti, we need to stop putting bits of blacktop down on our pavements. We need to sort out the Canterbury West car park, which is an ugly monster that's going up. We need to celebrate some of the new buildings, as indeed the Canterbury Society does with its award schemes for new buildings, because we can have good new buildings that fit really well with our heritage assets. We need a heritage officer who counts. I'm afraid that we have one at the moment who doesn't count. We need to actually celebrate our heritage and put it at the forefront of what we do, rather than at the back of it. Thank you.
I agree with everything that Stephen has said, and I just want to make 2 points really. It seems to me that we have got the problem that Nick mentioned as well, actually, of not actually prioritising maintaining the heritage in this city. I am part of a residents group, and Tim over there does a lot of the work on the planning, and it's really difficult because you put representation in about keeping the right frontage, the right windows, the right everything, the materials that new houses and big buildings are built with, and it's ignored. And so either, first of all, we haven't got the skills that we need in the City Council to maintain that heritage in the way that we used to have, because standards used to be much higher and much stricter and much tougher, and they're not. And B, we should listen to the residents who've got expertise, who've got skills, who are saying, and Canterbury Society, other people. Oh, I won't be able to make my other point. It was about how to raise the money. It was about how to raise the money.
Where are we? Right, I think we'll move on to another question, because we've got a great queue of questions now, so let's take yours, please.
We all know that we've got big traffic problems in the city, and there's no one clear answer to solve them all in one go. But one thing we can enjoy is a nice green corridor. So I'd like to know which where the council has put the preservation of this and what regulations they intend to bring in to see that this is preserved. And I'm talking about the green corridor from Westgate Towers to Jarton, instead of building a car park all over it.
So you're talking about the river corridor,
Yes.
the reservoir. So, and your question then is, what would you do to protect it?
To protect it.
Right, okay. Nick, you go first.
Well, first of all, not to put tarmac all over it and to put a park and ride there. If we need a larger park and ride, then as I say, if we're going to have the park and ride at Wincheap, and it's in my ward, and I'm perfectly happy for there to be a park and ride there, but it's going to need to be bigger, it's going to need to accommodate more cars coming off on the new 4th Slip Road. Therefore, make the park and ride on the existing site multi-storey and preserve the river meadow. It's so simple, it's so easy to do. And then you further ensure that the green corridor is extended right the way through to Surrey. At the moment, there's a bunch of supermarket trolleys and a few developers who are being backward in allowing that to happen. Get that corridor driven right the way through, from Chartham through to Surrey. It was done halfway, and it was done brilliantly against a certain amount of opposition, as far as Chartham's concerned. It's really loved by local people. Make the other half loved as well.
Ben, how will you preserve the river corridor?
Thank you. Firstly, I'd like to say that the Conservatives do not agree with the planning application that went in that saw spaces going virtually to the river edge at the site at Wincheap Park and Ride. We have been pushing hard for spaces to be brought back from the edge. It will cannibalise some spaces, but not nearly enough to make the project no longer worthwhile. This is the right place, unfortunately, for a park and ride for Canterbury. With the A2 Slip Road, it is the most accessible point. And to answer Councillor Eden Green's comments on a multi-storey, if you were to multi-storey what would be left of that site, you'd end up with a very thin and unusual building. You'd have to pile incredibly deeply because of where it is to build it. And because Park and Ride is already subsidised, there would be nothing to ever pay for that borrowing, and it would require a massive hike in your council tax. Now, some of you may be prepared to make that sacrifice and massively increase your council tax to pay for that. We think that we can come up with a compromise whereby we can protect large swathes around the expanded car park with forevermore as green spaces. But that is the right place for a park and ride if we want sustainable transport for getting in and out of Canterbury from the A2. And so I would continue to develop it, but with modifications.
Pat, next week.
I think I'd already mentioned that we oppose the car park being built there. I've heard a number of solutions. I was favouring the multi-storey, but I think that there are other spaces around Canterbury where more parking could be sustained. So we wouldn't do that. I think the other problem that we've identified, and a lot of people have identified, is the amount of debris in the river around this point. We need to work with the environmental agencies. We need to think about, well, it's rubbish and Serco and all the rest of it. We've already commented on how we would change that, but that contract needs to include cleaning that area, and the Environment Agency needs to play its part as well. I also agree that it should go all the way through the city, and I also mentioned earlier that we think cycle paths and walking across the city needs to be joined up. So I think that it is a very important part of all of our lives, and we all enjoy walking there. And so I would absolutely agree that it needs preservation.
Stephen, green corridor, any thoughts on that?
I mean, the Stour is one of our unique chalk rivers in the country, one of 200. It needs to be preserved. So I endorse those that everybody said about not building across that floodplain. In fact, it used to be council policy not to build beyond the building limit of the estate. But there's also the other end. You know, everybody's so keen that when we do something in Stour, what we need to do, we need to build a bypass. And then, let's put a cycleway along the bypass. In fact, there's a footpath by the railway, which is a direct route to keep a green corridor all the way through. Nobody thought about actually thinking about how these things. If you travel in this city, try to get across the city, as I do cycling to the university every day. It's great when you get up to the edge of the city, and then it's a nightmare. You know, nothing has been done really to link up the sides of the city. both in terms of public transport, but in particularly thinking about how we build these kind of through corridors which actually take in the city. Other places and towns have managed to do this, big cities and little cities. And I can't understand why Canterbury hasn't quite got to it yet.
Joe or Alan, do you want to come in quickly on this one? Okay. No, we'll move on. Thanks very much. I promised you at the back. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, Paul Todd, candidate for the Labour Party in Windsheet, but more importantly, in my view, is I've worked with the homeless in this city for 20 years, more or less. We have had a slew of people dying on our streets in the last year, and I simply wish to know how our council, under each of the parties and none, will deal with that, because it's got to end. It's an absolute disgrace in this city, in a place where, you know, the church attracts so many people to visit us, that we have people who live on our streets and die on our streets. It's the 21st century, folks. Come on.
Yeah.
How would you tackle the problems of homelessness and stop people dying on our streets? Nick, you start.
Well, how far have you got? How much time have you got? I mean, first of all, you've actually got to, I realise that, you've actually got to tackle the reasons behind people who are street homeless, and that's the real key and the real core. And it goes right the way back to the fact that the NHS has not tackled this, that Kent County Council Social Services haven't tackled the problem. We are not tackling people with mental health issues, who many of the street homeless do have mental health issues. All of these are the factors that's got to be dealt with. Secondly, we've got to support the existing charities who do noble work for the street homeless, but you've got to get at the core reason behind it first, and you've got to change society's thinking, you've got to change the NHS thinking, and you've got to change the investment that's put into mental health in order to really get at the core of the problem. Because dealing with street homeless in terms of hostels, in terms of giving them food, in giving them night shelter, is really, quite frankly, putting a very important sticking plaster, but nevertheless a sticking plaster over what is a national scandal.
Absolutely.
Our commitment is to have an all year round hostel for homelessness. We cannot see why we think that providing for people just when the temperature drops below or just an extended period in the winter is enough. It's not adequate. We've got the problem of a lot of people, as Paul said, being attracted to the city. We need to acknowledge that those people need a fair deal. And then, when you do that, you then have to support Porchlight, Catching Lives and other charities and organisations that work to help people who find themselves in these predicaments, which do often come from mental health problems or poverty or losing their house or whatever, to actually get themselves back on their feet. And I think that's a collective organisational responsibility. The City Council needs to take a lead, but we need to have kind of community groups involved in helping people to cope with the lives that they've got and get the provision and the services that they need.
Well done.
Steve?
I mean, this is a really important issue. I mean, it's an aspect of the fact that Canterbury is becoming a much, much more unequal place to live. Not in terms of life expectancy, in terms of income. I mean, it is increasingly becoming, and I think homelessness is just one very, very visible aspect of what is becoming a problem. Social housing, and in particular, Alan mentioned the use of housing associations and putting supported housing in. We need a range of things. We can't actually lever health and social care particularly. We can talk about it, we can make the arguments, but actually we also have to deal with the problem. So a hostel is great, but we need to actually have what's between being independent and what's between being supported. And I think we need that kind of supported social housing and bringing the services together, and I would endorse Pat's comments about working with voluntary organisations as well.
Well done.
Thank you. I work on St Peter's Street, so I interact with some of the city's homeless on a daily basis. I agree with a lot of what's been said. The reasons why people are homeless are very complicated, and we've certainly made inroads to reducing the numbers of homeless people that are sleeping on our streets. But our policy isn't to reduce the numbers of people that are homeless, it's to eliminate people being homeless. We've put significant amounts of extra money into resources to help us do that, but it is a problem that has to be tackled from a number of different fronts, including housing, including us not putting people in temporary accommodation all over the place, but we're actually buying housing, and we want to continue to buy housing in Canterbury District for temporary accommodation. We want to build social housing in Canterbury for people to live in. But this also has to come with the support to help homeless people and to help them with the issues that they have, whatever they may be. So it's a very complicated problem, but our goal has to be to eliminate homelessness completely. Thank you.
Jerry, you'd like to comment on this?
Yeah, I think the most important thing, take a page out of what Michael Heseltine did in the office, is got to get somebody who is really tough, competent and in charge to pull together the city, the county, national institutions for the reasons we've all heard about this being. But the first thing to do is to find somebody, an experienced retired businessman, for example, an experienced union leader perhaps, but somebody who has got real leadership skills, real experience in running something, and will get people together so they actually get the thing done and they work together, and he kicks back sides and he gets everyone working. And I don't think unless you get somebody like that, you're going to be able to tackle this complex problem.
Or she.
She, sorry. I apologise.
Well,
up to you.
Just a brief point. I mean, as I said, I've worked with housing associations in my freelance work over the years, and personally I feel they're best placed to be able to provide that from start to end support. We mustn't also forget at the same time the fantastic work that the churches do around Christmas and their community involvement. You know, the city relies on volunteers massively for all the various elements of society, of life. You know, we should be trying to bring those into the work and the efforts a lot more as well. Thanks.
Yes, we've heard about social housing, and we've just heard about homeless. There are areas of Canterbury of multiple deprivation and poverty. People aren't bothered about cars, they haven't got them. They're not bothered about heritage, they can't afford to go into any of it. What do the candidates feel could be done to actually help the disadvantaged neighbourhoods of our city? Because Canterbury is becoming polarised between those disadvantaged areas and the rest of the city, and I'd like to know what you're going to do about it.
What would you do to help the disadvantaged neighbourhoods within our city, Pat?
Well, we need a Labour government that would do something about universal credit and do something about the state of the system that supports people who have very little money. But very specifically, in Canterbury, we have a big problem with the way that our estates are managed, and we particularly want to talk about East Kent housing and the fact that they don't maintain the properties properly. There's a backlog of repairs. Everywhere we go in the city, when we go out and talk to people for this election, we have people complaining about the state of their properties and the fact that they can't get them maintained. There are also tenants who are not council tenants, who are not in maintained houses, who are also having problems, and we think there should be limits on the level of rents, and we think there should be a person within Canterbury City Council to deal with complaints about rental properties and to deal with complaints that would cross over the Canterbury City Council properties and the ordinary rental properties where there are difficulties. We think we should enforce good standards on landlords. We should actually take much more proactive on that as well. And just on a small point, because I won't have enough time, but we do need something to do with children's playgrounds and green spaces for the local communities. Because people, particularly in South Canterbury, are complaining about this all the time. They have nowhere to go with their children that doesn't cost any money. And actually we should be providing those green spaces, and we should be providing those play areas.
Well, we did have a Labour government, but I'm afraid they didn't tackle it. As far as East Kent Housing is concerned, I have been, yeah, it's all right, but it's true, and you didn't tackle it.
You went into
Thank you very much indeed. Yeah, and we brought in a pupil premium, and we're proud of it, and we brought in free school meals. Anyway, let me just deal with the question, if I may. East Kent Housing are not fit for purpose. I've been trying to get a rat problem sorted out in my ward for 7 months now. I've involved the chief executive of the council downwards, and still nothing has been done, and still I've got people who've got rats running around in their kitchen. That is the sort of problem that needs to be dealt with immediately and is simply not being dealt with by this council, and that is quite outrageous. The other thing that we should not be doing is to be buying up old student accommodation on Parham Road and expecting that that's a suitable place to put residents in on a social rent. People who very often have had broken lives and difficult lives in the middle of what is a student ghetto, with no open spaces, with no facilities, with no proper support infrastructure. That is the sort of thing that we should not be doing. We need to tackle council housing properly integrated within new developments, and that does not mean putting it in a patch or a part of any development, but ensuring that we have got developments which are generally open to all, and that includes council house tenants within them.
Can I just remind the candidates, since it's not just about housing, but about disadvantaged neighbourhoods generally. Ben, do you want to go next?
Thank you. With regards to housing stock, we absolutely need a mix of housing stock, and that includes the Parham Road development, but it also includes the houses that the council is building and the houses that the council is buying. These are all important parts of the mix. But to talk about those neighbourhoods in particular, East Kent housing are certainly an issue that we have been grappling with, and I don't want to pour fuel on that particular fire, but East Kent housing is something that I think we need to tackle and we need to address. And short term, that needs some stringent measures, and long term, perhaps that needs another solution. We'll just have to see. The Canterbury Society's vision for Canterbury includes references to making the cultural experiences and the pleasures of Canterbury available to everyone. And that's something that we really need to work to achieve. And the council, even though places like the Marlow Theatre are now in trust, there's no reason why we can't work with them and exert our influence on them to make sure that their offering is open to everybody and is truly open to those in neighbourhoods that wouldn't necessarily think about going out to the theatre, and the children that live in those neighbourhoods are enjoying the educational benefits that something like the Marlow Theatre is bringing to everybody else. So I would fully support that work to continue and hope that that's something that we can achieve. Thank you.
When you take housing costs into consideration, 40% of children in North Ward are living in poverty in one of the richest cities in the country. I mean, this is a disgrace that we really do need to start thinking about tackling in very, very different ways. Clearly, development of social housing in places which allow people to access things is important, so I concur with the Parham Court issue. We need to also think about how we can get local tenants, private tenants and council or social housing tenants involved in the management of their local areas as well. That's a way of levering other funds, community funds. There are funds available which, if the council worked a little bit harder with some of the local groups, would actually bring new investment into the city. I mean, this is how it works. I worked in north parts of Sheffield where they were doing this, bringing money into areas that were decimated by removal of industry. But it takes a willingness to actually partly give power to people, which I think is a little bit frightening for some councillors, but also to actually work with them to do it, to use the council's expertise to do this. And I think there are ways that we can do this, and I would want more tenant involvement. I think we need to address, the housing shortfall cost is enormous. It's a minimum of £15 a week for people. We need to do something. We can't do that nationally, so we've got to bring in resources locally.
I'm conscious that I'm discriminating against this half of the room, so let's have a question over here.
John Walker, Canterbury Society. We've heard several times mentioned about the corporate plan. which I assume most people in the room know what that's about. I've got a question about that. It's due for renewal, I think, probably after this next election. It gets renewed every 5 years.
It's renewed with every
five years, I think. And it contains all the council's goals that it wants to achieve over the next 5 years. So my question is, first of all, will the candidates ensure that the council properly consult people before they start writing the plan to find out what it is that the residents feel is important, should be done over the next 5 years? Second, will they work together to adopt the plan on a cross-party basis? And third, will they work together to deliver the plan on a cross-party basis? Thanks.
So, John, what was the difference between your second question and your third?
First, the second question was that they work together to adopt the plan on a cross-party basis.
Adopt,
and then that they work together to deliver it on cross-party lines.
Right. Okay. Consult before writing the corporate plan, work on a cross-party basis to get it adopted, and work on a cross-party basis to deliver it. Yep.
Yeah.
Ben.
Thank you. On consultation, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that we have taken very seriously is changing how we consult and when we consult. And the best time to consult is before you've decided anything. Because if you're consulting after you've decided something, then what is the point of consulting? So we would absolutely want to know what residents think and feel for inclusion in the corporate plan. In terms of what goes into it, a corporate plan has some specific things that may be from the administration that is elected, and so there may therefore be political things, so it may be difficult to have cross-party support in implementing that. But a lot of what a corporate plan is are guiding principles that guide the day-to-day decisions from council officers. Because council officers do an incredible amount of work every day, and they need a document that governs, is this something that we should be doing or should not be doing? And that's what the corporate plan boils down to, principles that guide us. And if you look at the current corporate plan, a lot of it is principles that guide what we do. But there's no reason why those principles shouldn't be born from consultation. So, absolutely. Thank you.
Pat, go ahead.
As I said in my opening speech, the whole basis on which the Labour Party would run the council and behave within the group would be on a basis of listening and genuinely taking residents' views and having residents' views at the heart of what we would do. We feel that it's been ignored. So consultation is only good if it actually affects the outcome of the plan, and that we would commit to that absolutely. The next thing to say is that I agree with Ben that there could be things. We've already seen some disagreements between the parties. But if I believe that the Labour Party vision would be able to be implemented, because I actually think that it reflects the views of people, of residents. If it didn't, we would listen. So on the basis that it would reflect the views of residents, on the basis that the plan would be reflective of that consultation process and the ideas that we bring, and I think it's already been said before today, that it's really important that we recognise how many talented and skilled people we've got in the local community who have extremely good and brilliant ideas and a history of working in communities that we can bring to that consultation, to the outcome of that. The next thing is, of course, that some of that plan doesn't get implemented at the moment. So commitment to actually implementing it would require, if we're going to go cross-party, that we all then sign up to it. And from my point of view, as I say, I believe that genuine consultation will produce a plan that we're genuinely proud of, that will reflect the values and the approach in our manifesto, and we will be able to sign up to that. Fine.
Well, I think I've heard the other parties say that in the corporate plan they would sign up to the Canterbury vision and also to the Sustainable Development Goals. So there does seem to be some agreement between the parties, and clearly those are things that we would want to work with everybody to do. So I think the answer to the question again here is yes, yes, yes and yes. And I think the Greens, not just locally but actually nationally, have shown that we work very well with other parties that share those kinds of visions. I mean, clearly financial issues are going to place challenges, but it seems to me there are two principles which I would like to see really underpinned. Local Government Act says that councils should look at the well-being of their citizens and residents. There's a principle I would like to see actually pushed right at the beginning of the corporate plan and actually enacted in some of the policies that are pursued.
I go back to my opening remarks of what I said at the outset. Overall, our vision would be to see all parties working together. It happened when we ran the council. We had a local plan agreed by all parties. We agreed to rebuild the Marlow. We agreed a recycling scheme. We want to return to those days. That's what I said at the outset, and that's what I say again in answer to this question. We don't want consultation where you have 6,900 people responding to the local plan. 6,900 people who weren't even listened to. Not one jot of their statements was taken into account when the local plan was put through. That is not consultation. We must indeed consult beforehand and before these major decisions are made. Yes, we can find out what people want. We will get conflicting decisions and conflicting ideas, but we should bear that in mind. Yes, we should adopt these things cross-party, and yes, we must deliver cross-party, because that's the only way that you will deliver to all of the citizens in this district. It can be done, it's been done in the past, and we need to do it again in the future.
Jan, I need to look to you for guidance here because we're due to finish at 9, I think, so I think we better make this the last question. And a minute for you as well, so we could go maybe to 3 minutes past 9. Yeah. Okay, one more question then, and let's take it from somewhere in this half of the room. Oh, you've all gone silent. All right, from anywhere, back there then, yeah. I'm sorry, I did promise Robin earlier, didn't I? Yes. Sorry, do you mind? I'll just take it.
Thank you.
Two.
I first of all, I'd like to pay tribute to 2 local politicians who have dared to speak up and out publicly about congestion charging in the past. And I hear, we all hear, London has just announced the ULEZ, the ultra low emission zones. And that's plus, they can pay up to £100 a day for that, and that is plus the congestion charge. And my question then is, what is your policy on the ultra low emission zones and congestion charging for Canterbury district, assuming you've got one? Thank you.
So what's your policy on the ultra
low emission zones? And they're coming, as somebody said, we follow other places, and that's... And
okay. Stephen, come up.
Yeah. Well, the Green Party supports congestion charging and low emission zones. I think there are difficulties in Canterbury, but immediately I think we'll be looking at applying a low emission zone in 2 ways. One is requiring all buses and taxis to meet the most stringent levels of emissions, which would be basically hybrid or electric. And secondly, I would want to explore a workplace charge, which has been successfully put in places like Nottingham, has now been looked at by a number of councils. Not only does it raise revenue, it actually keeps vehicles out of the city centre. And that would be a step towards a low emission zone, followed by an ultra low emission zone, where we can actually put the technology in place.
Sorry about that.
You were nearly ejected there. Ben.
Thank you. I don't think this is an issue that has to be party political. I think this is an issue that has to be led by residents and what they want for the city of Canterbury. Clearly we have congestion and pollution issues in our city that we need to deal with, and low emission zones and ultra low emission zones are one of the things that we've discussed at the Sustainable Transport Forum. We need to investigate the impact that those will have on the residents of Canterbury. We need to ensure that there is fairness if people are going to be charged. There is an awful lot to discuss, to consult upon and to discover before we should consider something like that for our city. And I'm very open, and the Conservative Party is very open to talking to all stakeholders about how that might become a reality and who it would affect and how. Thank you.
Nick, next.
Yeah, I mean, we've got this written into our policy on congestion. It's there and there for the reading. But we will consult initially on a congestion charge, and that means properly consulting. I personally am absolutely in favour of congestion charge and indeed of low emissions charges. And I think that that is the way forward, and it's going to be dictated to us by the awful pollution and the awful figures that we're getting, and indeed the health of our citizens on the streets. But there are other lobbies that we must listen to as well. They may not be popular with me, but I will listen to them. And I think that consultation means just that on this. It's going to be a controversial issue. My mind is pretty much made up, but I will listen to others as well, because we need to hear both sides of the argument. Canterbury is a small city, it's not a London. We can't put on public transport at the level that London can. We don't have the mass of people that will make public transport viable in the way that public transport is in London or in Manchester or even in Nottingham. So we need to talk to other people, we need to listen, we need to put forward leads, and we need to put forward policies on it. But for heaven's sakes, that doesn't mean that we just trenchantly put something in which many people will find very difficult to operate, particularly people who need to come into the city from the outlying villages, who rely on Canterbury as their centre for shopping and for social purposes.
We have a raft of measures to improve air quality and to think about, first of all, I mentioned about electric vehicles for the City Council. We agree about the taxes, and the bus services need, I mean, this is going to take time because obviously stagecoach and all this, but the bus services also need to move over to electric. So if the commercial vehicles were doing it and so on, it will be a precursor to doing exactly that, I think, because I think it makes absolute sense that we do have low emission zones. I think it makes absolute sense that we have some way of restricting traffic in the city centre. I personally am in favour of a congestion charge, but I also think there needs to be consultation, because I have heard people say that it would be costly for some people who have certain, you'd have to think very carefully about what kinds of, what people are exempt from that. I mean, taxis, for example, somebody down my road said to me, well, if you had a congestion charge, it would be really difficult for taxi firms. So again, you have to think they'd be allowed in, but they'd have to have the cars that have low emissions, and that's the way you frame it. So what I'm saying is it's a piece of work. I think it's really worth consulting on all of that, but I think there are lots of measures that need to go in place before you can try and impose something like that on a small city.
Last opportunity, so do you want to come back on this one at all?
Yes, can I just say, I think the pollution issue around this city, in certain aspects, and I'd add delivery vehicles around the centre, is becoming so serious that actually this isn't an option on which that while we can consult about what we do on certain aspects of it, I don't think the principle should be any more up for grabs. I think it is quite straightforwardly intolerable that we should have this level of pollution around the city. And it's not just people, there's also, I am quite certain, this level of pollution is doing damage to our historic fabric of buildings, and we simply have to say, stop.
Just to add on to that, really, I think that obviously I touched on the park and rides earlier. We currently have a very poor park and ride scheme with only 3 sites, 2 of which are proper ones, and I think the Winchie one's in the wrong location. But they also don't serve the right hours either, because you look at the Marlow Theatre, you have queues of cars around Pound Lane car park and the other areas, and clogging up the roads late at night as well. We need actually a service that runs throughout the day. It shouldn't be just a low emission zone, it should be a low congestion zone. We should be trying to actually move the traffic overall, regardless if it's electric, petrol, diesel, away from the city centre and make it a lot more pedestrian and cycle friendly.
Okay, well, I'm going to hand back to Jan to close the meeting, but can I just say on my own behalf, first of all, just to thank you all for an excellent evening's debate, which has been really top class, great questions, great audience, and many, many thanks from me to all the candidates for the spirit in which you've answered those questions. Many thanks.
Just a few things to say at the end. We've talked about the vision, the Canterbury Society's vision. Here it is. Strictly speaking, it's free to members of the Canterbury Society, and everyone else has to pay £2. But But maybe, since you've all shown commitment and good questions and a great audience, I think if you're interested, pick up a copy and take it home. But don't just take it home and look at it once and throw it in the bin. Give it back to me if you don't. We welcome invitations from residents groups to present ideas in the vision to them and discuss them. So if you belong to a residents group that might be interested, do get in touch with either Jacqueline or myself. And we welcome, and I hope we're going to have, I'll be talking to Ben about this, discussions with councillors and council officers to take the ideas and the vision forward. If you want to join the Canterbury Society, there's leaflets at the back. There's also leaflets, we've heard quite a lot about the Sustainable Development Goals. There's leaflets if you're interested in that, and that's a whole Sustainable Development Forum, which is roaring forward, and I think we'll be very glad of your support. Two coming Canterbury Society events, which actually pick up on issues this evening. We're doing a little pick around the World Heritage Site. That's on the 28th of April, that's a Sunday, 2 o'clock in the Longport car park. So come along if you like little picking, or if you care about the World Heritage Site, or just want to join us. There'll be refreshments, free beer. And in June the 19th, we're having an event focused on the issues of poverty and homelessness that came up several times this evening. So that might be something you'd like to come along to. And finally, just to echo Rick, thank you for coming. Thank you for some really excellent questions. Thank you to all the candidates who I think gave us some really thoughtful answers. And have a safe journey home.